Hey YouTube, Colin here. So, welcome to the first video on my channel. I guess I'll start by explaining what this channel is meant for, how things are going to go, and what type of videos I'll be posting. So, I'm a book lover. Anybody that knows me knows that I love to read, I love to buy books. So, I figured I'd start a YouTube channel here to share my love of books with everyone. And I'd like to kind of generate a community where we can talk about books. I don't really want, my intentions aren't to have a channel that blows up and I get tons of views. I just want to have, a few people that check in every now and then and talk about books with me. So yeah, I'll be covering a lot of fiction as well as nonfiction, mainly historical fiction. That's kind of what I'm into right now. So yeah, I'm going to be doing book hauls every now and then, showing what I got and talking about some books with you guys. And I'll also be reviewing books, giving my opinions on certain books, and making lists of some of my favorite books just to share my love of them with you. So with that being said, let's get into the purpose of this video. So this past weekend, the Friends of the Library at Chapel Hill had a book sale, getting rid of a ton of books. So I went on Saturday and Sunday, which is today. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you what I got today. I will make a part 2 on what I got on Saturday. But for right now, let's stick to what I got today. So today they had a $10 bag sale. So you brought in your bag, you filled it up with as many books as you could fit in the bag, and you paid $10 for it. Doesn't matter how many books are in there. As long as it fits in the bag, you pay $10 for it. You got it. So let's get into the first one. One of the first ones I picked up was this novel. It's called Savushan, and pardon my pronunciation, but the author's name is Simin Danishvar. So this is a Persian novel, and it was actually recommended by my sister, who read it for one of her classes at her university. So she's been bugging me to read this. So she found it and was like, Colin, stick it in your bag. So pick this up. The back reads, Savushan is a folk tradition surviving in southern Iran from an undateable pre-Islamic past that conjures hope in spite of everything. The novel chronicles the life of a Persian family during World War II Allied occupation of Iran. It is set in Shiraz, a town which evokes images of Persepolis and pre-Islamic monuments. The great Persian poets, the shrines, Sufis, the nomadic tribes, all within a historical web of the interest, privilege, and influence of foreign powers, corruption, incompetence, and arrogance of persons in authority. The story is seen through the eyes of Zari, a young wife and a mother who copes with her idealistic husband while struggling with her desire for traditional family life and her need for an individual identity. Simin Danishvar lives and continues to write in Iran. So, seemed like a pretty interesting novel. Sounds pretty good, so I can't wait to read it. Next, we have a book by one of my favorite fiction writers, but it's not a fiction book. It's actually a memoir of his life. So this is Living to Tell the Tale by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Memoir, it was actually supposed to be a trilogy to my understanding. Covers the first area of his life. I don't believe he ever got around to writing the other 2 volumes, but it would still be an interesting look into one of my favorite authors and the things that inspired his fiction. So let's read the inside cover. In this long-awaited first volume of a planned trilogy, the most acclaimed and revered living Nobel laureate begins to tell us the story of his life. Like all his work, Living to Tell the Tale is a magnificent piece of writing. It spans Gabriel Garcia Marquez's life from his birth in 1927 through the start of his career as a writer to the moment in the 1950s when he proposed to the woman who would become his wife. So that's a little excerpt from it. So it seems pretty interesting. Like I said, he's one of the great fiction writers of all time. Wrote 100 Years of Solitude, Love in the Time of Cholera, several great novellas. No One Writes to the Colonel. Yeah, he's a really good writer. So like I said, I'm really into historical nonfiction right now. So I actually picked up 3 books by this next author. So here's the first one. It's The Greater Journey, Americans in Paris by David McCullough. David McCullough, he's a pretty popular, actually very popular popular historian. He writes about a ton of different areas, and I'd say he's pretty well respected. in the community of popular history authors. Here's what it says on the back. David McCullough has twice received the Pulitzer Prize for Truman and John Adams. Stick around for those. And twice received the National Book Award, The Path Between the Seas, and Mornings on Horseback. His other acclaimed books are 1776, Brave Companions, The Great Bridge, and The Johnstown Flood. He is a recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian award. So yeah, I think that'd be pretty interesting. I'm kind of like curious as to what Americans did in Paris that was so great. I've heard that some of the book covers like medicine and how Americans in France and Paris helped develop certain medicines. I just heard that anything he writes is pretty interesting and good. He kind of writes history and kind of like a novelist almost, from what I've heard. So yeah, I can't wait to dive into this one. The second book I got by David McCullough is Truman, this absolutely massive volume. It's almost 1,000 pages, I believe. So he really studied Truman. So I really don't know a lot about Truman. I'm really interested in World War II. I know that he took over, after Roosevelt died, and he made some big decisions in his presidential career. He made the decision to drop both atomic bombs on Japan, and he also helped rebuild Europe a lot after World War II. So he seems like an interesting guy. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I've heard a lot of great things about this book in particular. The back cover reads, "The life of Harry S. Truman is one of the greatest American stories, filled with vivid characters. Roosevelt, Churchill, Stalin, Eleanor Roosevelt, Bess Wallace Truman, George Marshall, Joe McCarthy, and Dean Acheson, and dramatic events. In this riveting biography, acclaimed historian David McCullough not only captures the man, more complex, informed, and determined man than ever before imagined, but also the turbulent times in which he rose boldly to meet unprecedented challenges. The last president to serve as a living link between the 19th and the 20th centuries, Truman's story spans the raw world of the Mississippi frontier, World War I, the powerful Pendergast machine of Kansas City, the legendary Whistle Stop campaign of 1948, and the decisions to drop the atomic bomb, confront Stalin at Potsdam, send troops to Korea, and fire General MacArthur. Drawing on newly discovered archival material and extensive interviews with Truman's own family, friends, and Washington colleagues, McCullough tells the deeply moving story of the seemingly ordinary man from Missouri who was perhaps the most courageous president in our history." So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the part where he fires MacArthur, because MacArthur was notoriously bad at dealing with decisions by his higher-ups that he didn't like. So I'm sure that he had a wonderful response to Truman's firing of him. So that's going to be very interesting to read. I'm sure it will take me a bit to get through this thick volume, though. So the third and final David McCullough book I got is probably one of his most famous, John Adams. Tons of people have read this book, and tons of people said it's really good. It actually inspired a HBO series in 2008, I believe. So yeah, it obviously went over well. It sold a lot of copies. I know David McCullough, sometimes he gets picked on by more like academic historians. But unless you're actually like really like, I guess, professionally studying John Adams or whatever you're reading about from him, I think if you're just reading to enjoy it, I don't really think it matters if he missed a few minor details or he kind of writes like a novel or, So a little bit from the inside flap. In this powerful epic biography, David McCullough unfolds the adventurous life journey of John Adams, the brilliant, fiercely independent, often irascible, always honest Yankee patriot who feared nothing in his zeal for the American Revolution, who rose to become the second president of the United States and save the country from blundering into an unnecessary war, who was learned beyond all but few and regarded by some as out of his senses, and whose marriage to the wise and valiant Abigail Williams is one of the moving love stories in American history. So yeah, I don't really know a lot about John Adams. You're always hearing about George Washington, Ben Franklin, but John Adams kind of doesn't get talked about as much in the realm of our founding fathers of America. So I figured it'd be interesting to dive into what he has to say about John Adams and learn more about this figure. And I'm sure Benjamin Franklin is going to be mentioned a lot in this book. I believe him and Franklin did a lot of diplomacy work in France, so that will definitely be interesting to read about and learn about. So I'm a really big Winston Churchill fan, so I picked up a couple books about Winston Churchill. This first one's actually one that he wrote. It's called The Story of the Malecon Field Force. So there is, I believe, a young Winston Churchill. Never seen him that young before, but so that's pretty interesting. I honestly have absolutely no clue what this book's about. I just got it because Winston Churchill wrote it, and it looked to be in really good condition, so I thought I'd pick it up. I mean, it's $10 bag sale. You just throw whatever you want in there, right? So I'll read what's on the back, which is an excerpt from the book, I believe. In the quarrels of civilized nations, great armies, many thousand strong, collide. In all this tumult, this wholesale slaughter, the individual and his feelings are utterly lost. Only the army has a tale to tell. But on the frontier, in the clear light of morning, when the mountainside is dotted with smoke puffs and every ridge sparkles with bright sword blades, the spectator may observe and accurately appreciate all grades of human courage. The wild fanaticism of the Ghazi, the composed fatalism of the Sikh, the stubbornness of the British soldier, and the jaunty daring of his officers. He may remark occasions of devotion and self-sacrifice, of cool cynicism and stern resolve. He may participate in moments of wild enthusiasm or savage anger and dismay. The skill of the general, the quality of the troops, the eternal principles of the art of war will be as clearly displayed as on historic fields. So yeah, for a general and eventually prime minister, Churchill was a pretty good writer, so can't wait to read this account of the Malecon Field Force. So yeah, I'm just a big Winston Churchill fan, so yeah. Tell me if you like Winston Churchill. I'll get around to the other Winston Churchill book later in this video, but for now, the next on the pile is this book, The Generals, American Military Command from World War II to Today, by Thomas E. Ricks. So yeah, here's the book, The Generals. So as you can probably tell from the title, this is a study of prevalent American generals. It goes through World War II. It goes through the Korean War, Vietnam, all the way up to the Iraq War, covers generals such as Patton, MacArthur, Marshall, who I believe he considers the gold standards of generals that he's kind of using as a baseline to compare the other generals to. Guys like Maxwell Taylor, who I actually found out was played a pretty big role in the Vietnam War. He actually led the 101st Airborne into Normandy, so he's a pretty cool guy, so it'll be fun to learn about him. So yeah, let's read the inside cover, or a bit of it. History has been kind to the American generals of World War II, Marshall, Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley, and less kind to the generals of the wars that followed. In The Generals, Thomas E. Ricks sets out to explain why that is. In part, it is the story of a widening gulf between performance and accountability. During the Second World War, scores of American generals were relieved of command simply for not being good enough. Today, as the American colonel bitterly said during the Iraq War, as matters stand now, a private who loses a rifle suffers far greater consequences than a general who loses a war. In the generals, we meet great leaders and suspect ones, generals who rose to the occasion and those who failed themselves and their soldiers. Marshall and Eisenhower cast long shadows over the story, as does the less familiar Marine General O.P. Smith, whose fighting retreat from the Chinese onslaught into Korea in the winter of 1950 snatched a kind of victory from the jaws of annihilation. See, I'm actually really looking forward to this one. As you can probably tell by some of the books I picked out, and by subsequent videos on this channel, I'm really into military history, studying people who held command over armies, and so I think this will be really interesting. I'm really into the Civil War as well. That's probably my main field of historical interest as of right now. So it'll be interesting to compare some of the leadership that occurred later in American history to some of the leadership that was happening during the Civil War and the Mexican-American Wars, and kind of see how the role of generals has evolved in the American military. So I really can't wait to read this one, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'll probably post a review about it once I get around to that. This next book is the only other fiction book I got today. There was a pretty decent a section of fiction on Saturday, but today it had actually pretty much been wiped clean. There were very few books left, so I wasn't able to get a lot of fiction in this one. In the second part, there will be a lot more fiction and it'll be a lot more balanced. But so this video is mainly nonfiction because that's really all that was left today that I had interest in. But I've actually never heard of this artist before. Apparently, he's one of the foremost Japanese novelists, and I do enjoy Japanese literature. Haruki Murakami is one of my favorite authors, so I figured I'd give another prevalent Japanese writer a try. So this is Stormrider by Akira Yoshimura. So I picked that up because I just want to read more Japanese literature. I'm trying to kind of expand my horizons, read literature from other countries other than like America and England and all those countries that's kind of fall into the Western canon. So I'll read a little bit about this from the inside cover. Hikotaro is 13 years old and an orphan, left to die of adventure at sea. When the merchant vessel he sails on is caught in a violent storm on the Pacific, an American ship comes to the rescue and takes him to San Francisco. With trepidation and hope, the young boy, dubbed Tizoko by the American sailors, struggles to find a place in his new country. He dreams of returning to his village, but shogunate policy forbids re-entry to Japanese who have been abroad. Still he tries, sailing to Hong Kong aboard a ship commanded by the legendary Commodore Matthew Perry, who would eventually go on to open up trade with the Japanese between them and the Americans, only to be refused and returned to California. There, a wealthy American businessman adopts the young man, takes him east to Baltimore, and introduces him to a world of influence and power. 10 years later, Hizoku finally returns to a Japan stirred into violence as the country opens to the world. But America is in the midst of the bloody Civil War, and there is no place he can call home. Based closely on real characters and events, this extraordinary rich novel is both a compelling personal odyssey and epic portrait of two great nations in the making. So yeah, I like learning about Japanese and American relations. I recently read The Rising Sun by John Toland, which covers the Japanese Empire from 1936, I believe, to the end of World War II, and shortly after the war ended. And that's one of the best books I've ever read. I mean, history or fiction, nonfiction, it's definitely one of the best reading experiences I've had. So I'm really interested in that. And also, as you heard, this novel involves the American Civil War, so it's definitely something I would be interested in. So can't wait to read it, and I'll probably review this as well. All right, going back to the Founding Fathers for a bit, this next book is James Madison and the Struggle for the Bill of Rights by Richard Labunsky. So here it is. It's a pretty short book. I believe it's only 250 pages. So I really need to learn more about the Founding Fathers and the Revolutionary War and, the founding of the country, really. So I figured this would be a pretty interesting read and informative and pretty quick as well. So here's a little bit about the book. Today, the Bill of Rights is such a cornerstone of American democracy that we can scarcely imagine a nation without it. Yet the birth of the Bill of Rights was no foregone conclusion. Rather, it was the outcome of a furious debate and an epic political struggle that might have fragmented the American Republic even as it was being formed. In these pages, Richard Labunsky offers a dramatic account of how an unlikely hero, the shy, soft-spoken, and scholarly James Madison, almost single-handedly brought the Bill of Rights to life against daunting odds, forever shaping and perhaps even saving the United States. So yeah, it seems like an interesting read. Like I said, I do want to delve a bit into nonfiction, based on the founding of the country, the Founding Fathers, and James Madison's someone who really doesn't get talked about a lot. I really don't know much about him at all. So it's definitely going to be informative. It's definitely going to teach me a lot about how the Bill of Rights was founded. As we all know, in America, the Bill of Rights is very important, and it gives us a lot of freedoms that we have today. I've never heard of Richard Labunsky. I don't know if he's a good author or not, so don't really have anything to base that on, but it will be fun to see if he is a good author, and maybe I'll check out more of his books if I enjoy this one. So I don't have any literary criticism or writing about literature, so I figured I'd pick this one up. It's seemed pretty cool. It's A Reader's Guide to Shakespeare by Joseph Rosenblum. So I like Shakespeare. I've read several of his plays. I'm not as well read in Shakespeare as I would like to be, but I do like his plays a lot. I'm not really into his sonnets. I love poetry, and I think he was definitely a good poet. I don't think you can really argue that. But his sonnets have never really done it for me. I've just never really been into them. Definitely not as much as his plays. So yeah, this book is fairly interesting. It goes through all of his plays, and basically it's kind of like essays, I guess, collected essays on each of his plays to kind of help you understand Shakespeare better. I know a lot of people, including myself, struggle with Shakespeare. He's definitely a hard writer to kind of grasp, especially with his antiquated forms of English, yet beautiful forms of English. So I figure this will definitely be helpful in understanding Shakespeare's world, his mind when it comes to writing plays, and kind of what he was getting at, maybe some underlying themes of his works. So here's a little bit about the book. Dazzling richness of language, plot, and characterization first draws us into the plays of Shakespeare. Yet the same richness can soon be overwhelming, condemning non-specialist readers to unprofitable guesswork. The purpose of this book is simple: to support and guide readers in the happier task of understanding Shakespeare's writings so they can be more fully enjoyed. The volume opens with a 60-page biographical essay and closes with an account of how the image of Shakespeare and the evaluation of his work has changed over the centuries. The heart of this book is a series of individual essays, arranged alphabetically and styled uniformly for every play. Each essay begins with the basic information about the play, including a list of principal characters. A loose synopsis of the story follows, making even difficult work such as Cymbeline and Pericles easy to comprehend. The play's methods and meaning are then considered in a concise and probing critical treatment. To help readers visualize the plays in performance, there are many vivid photographs from the stage and film productions. To aid easy reference and further research, indexes by character, key quotation, and subject are provided, as is an extensive bibliography. So yeah, and it also actually covers the sonnets as well. So as I said, it's not really my forte or my taste or my cup of tea, however you say it. But it will still be interesting to understand what was going through his mind, or at least attempt to, even in writing his sonnets. Definitely looking forward to whenever I go back to Shakespeare. I'm definitely gonna have to consult this and see what this man's opinions were on his plays, and it even comes with an interesting bookmark from the Denver Zoo. So yeah, I support conservation. There you go. But I actually yesterday, the first day I went to the sale, they had Harold Bloom's literary criticism on Shakespeare, and I didn't realize how picked over the books were going to be today. So I was hoping to get that one, but this one seems pretty good as well. So I'm hoping that it is. This is an interesting work on, I guess, theology, but maybe also could be considered a book on sociology. But it's called Heaven, a History by Colleen McDaniel and Bernhard Lang. So I thought that was interesting. The theology and religion section there was kind of underwhelming. I've kind of been meaning to get more books on that, but this was probably the most interesting book that they had in the religion section. So a little bit on the back about the book. To medieval missionaries, heaven was a city-state surrounded by 7 castles, where the niceties of the court were still observed. In the Renaissance, heaven was reimagined as a park where the blessed disported themselves on a bench, and any new arrival could converse with the saints and martyrs. To the 18th century theosophist Emanuel Swedenborg, pardon my pronunciation, heaven included marriage, spiritual sex, and cats. This lively, learned, and abundantly illustrated study combs through a wealth of sources, from New Testament to Thomas Aquinas, from women mystics of the Middle Ages to modern-day fundamentalists, and from Giotto's frescoes to chic religious comics, to examine the idea of paradise in the Judeo-Christian tradition. It presents us with heaven's theocentric and anthropocentric heavens of pure light and heavens like Victorian sitting rooms complete with pianos. Above all, Heaven, a History shows how an age's vision of the afterlife reflects its sense of life on earth. So, from what I understand, this book's not trying to explain to the reader what heaven definitely is. It's just covering society's views of heaven and how they changed over time, how they fit with the certain agendas of the day, and how people kind of, I guess, sometimes manipulated what heaven is supposed to be like to fit their own plans. So it seems like a very interesting work. I believe it's from a secular perspective as well, so it's definitely interesting. But for interesting study for anyone who believes in the afterlife, like I do, anyone who believes in heaven. It seems like a very interesting work, and maybe it will challenge your own ideas on what heaven may be like. So nearing the end of the book haul here, I told you we'd return to Churchill. This is a biography on Winston Churchill titled Churchill, A Major New Assessment of His Life in Peace and War, edited by Robert Blake and W.M. Roger Lewis. So, like I said, I'm a pretty big Churchill fan. He's definitely one of the more interesting historical figures, in my personal opinion. I definitely like learning how he acted in World War II, how he led his country, fought Nazism. He was a really great leader. He had that charisma that every leader needs to effectively lead a country, especially in times of war like Churchill did. He just had a charisma about him and was able to rally his country and give those stirring speeches that really fired people up to protect Britain, to fight for Britain, and kept morale up throughout the war. So he was obviously a crucial figure, being prime minister during World War II. He made a lot of heavy decisions. So I'm definitely looking forward to this. I've never actually read a biography on Churchill before, so I'm definitely willing to get into this and learn a bit more about the man and how he went about his duties. So a little bit about the book. A stirring war leader, an orator unequaled as the rallier of a nation under siege, a powerful writer, Winston Churchill was all of these and more. By now he has become a figure of almost mythic proportions. To find the man within the legend is the task to which 29 renowned British and American historians and political leaders dedicate themselves in this volume. It may be the last assessment possible of Churchill's life and career by those who, for the most part, came of age during the Churchill era. From his youth in the landed aristocracy through his early experiences of war to service in Parliament over 7 storm-tossed decades, Churchill takes us far beyond the surface of events. Here is Winston Churchill, surprisingly, a founder of the modern welfare state. He became a principal driving force behind the liberal welfare reforms of 1908 to 11. In the 1920s, we find him astonished to be offered the position of Chancellor of the Exchequer, pardon my pronunciation. After accepting, he reflected that I should have answered, "Will the bloody duck swim?" His concern with the domestic affairs bracketed by the years of First World War, which saw him initially as First Lord of the Admiralty. Churchill tasted failure in the disastrous defeat of the Dardanelles expedition in 1915. There followed 2 years in the wilderness, during which he took a battalion command on the Western Front. He hankered after brilliant coups, heroic adventure on a small but decisive scale. But he had learned a crucial lesson for his later years as war leader of Britain. Against an adversary as formidable as the Germans, there was no substitute for the massive organization and skillful application of force on the largest scale possible, backed up by science and technology. So yeah, I believe it's been compiled by 29 different leading historians on Winston Churchill. So I like that idea of having multiple perspectives where it's not just the same person's opinions throughout the book. You get like a wide range of thoughts and views on Churchill, and so it's not just the same type of echo chamber effect. You get a very, very broad understanding of him from multiple perspectives. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting into Winston Churchill's biography. And yeah, on to the last item. So as I mentioned multiple times in this video, I'm big into the Civil War. So you might be wondering, why are there no Civil War books in this haul? Well, the last thing I got involves the Civil War. And do not ask me how I missed this when I went on Saturday, because I would have picked this up immediately. This is more of a coffee table book, I guess, but it was just too cool to pass up. So this book is actually a collection of paintings by Mort Kunstler, who is a painter from Brooklyn, and he is probably one of my favorite painters of all time. He painted tons of things from American culture, but what he was probably best well known for was his paintings of the Civil War. So this is Jackson and Lee, Legends in Gray, the paintings of Mort Kunstler, text by James I. Robertson Jr. So I was lucky enough to be able to fit this massive, wide, well, not massive, but wide and very tall volume and into my bag. It's just really a collection of these beautiful paintings, and it does have a bit of a text to go with it, basically explaining certain things that Jackson and Lee did throughout the war, a bit of a really not in-depth narrative of different things those men did throughout the war. Here's one of the paintings included. Yeah. As you can see, very realistic. He that's really what he strove for. I mean, this guy was a prodigy at painting when he was a child, from what I've heard. I believe he was 12 years old when his parents recognized how talented he was at painting. I don't even know if he was painting Civil War stuff then, but I mean, imagine a 12-year-old cranking out paintings like this. But yeah, painted about, I think he would paint like 350 different Civil War pieces during his time, but he is absolutely got to be the best painter of Civil War material. He also did a lot of World War II paintings, Vietnam War paintings. He did a lot of stuff, but like I said, I'm just in love with the man's art, and I'm really glad that I was able to pick this up. Well, if you stuck around this far, I'd like to thank you for listening to some of the stuff I've got and my ramblings about my haul today. This probably isn't going to be the format that I'm usually going to be doing. I feel like the majority of this channel is going to be reviews of books and my thoughts on books and literature, and probably make a few lists of some of my favorite books. I'm probably going to make a separate fiction and nonfiction list eventually of my top 10 favorite books or something like that. So yeah, the next video after this one's going to be part 2, which will cover my haul from Saturday, which was just a standard book, a standard library sale, $3 hardcovers, $2 paperbacks. So definitely a lot. That one's probably half fiction, half nonfiction, I'd say. So I don't know when that one's going to get posted, but that will be my next video. Then after that, I'll probably get into reviewing some books, giving my opinions on some books. Right now, I'm currently reading Trainspotting by Irvine Welsh, so I will definitely be reviewing this one. I'm going to finish it pretty soon. As you can see, I'm pretty much done with the book. But yeah, so definitely look out for that one. I'm also reading a biography of Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a cavalry general for the Confederacy and during the Civil War in the Western Theater. So I might review that one. I'm not sure on that or not, if I will or not yet. I don't know if I could come up with enough stuff for that book, but I'll definitely think about reviewing that one. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please leave comments if you've read any of these books. Leave book recommendations. If you want to see any certain type of video, leave a comment. Like I said, I want to kind of make this channel a bit of a community where people can just come here in the comments, talk about books, and yeah, and if you're thinking of starting a booktube, please do it. Like, I'd love to follow some, or if you have a channel, comment and I will subscribe. I definitely need to get some more booktubers to follow. So yeah, thanks for watching and bye.